Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask some questions about the channel crossings that we've seen in small boats and dinghies. And my questions are for Tony Smith. What do you understand to be the scale and spread of illegal migration via small boats since the start of the lockdown?
Well, I mean, this was declared a critical incident by the Home Secretary last year. In my experience, critical incidents are declared in order to put out the fire, if you like, with a task force, and that when the fire's put out, we return to business as normal. So it's too enduring to be just a critical incident. I think this is becoming a major threat, I'm afraid, to the UK border. I mean, you will see as much about the numbers as I do. As I understand it, the French are in some circumstances being able to prevent boats from coming across, but we've seen recent evidence produced in the media of that not happening, or vessels being pushed out to sea. That's a huge risk to life and limb, which should be our top priority in any case, wherever you're from. Because the migrants are told by the smugglers that if you get picked up by the UK border force, then you're going to be okay. You're going to get into the UK. Whereas if you get picked up by the French, then you're going to get sent back here again. So aim to get out close to a UK border force vessel. You'll get picked up, and then you can come across. So that does raise questions about our capability. The capability we have is a legacy one. The cutters were there before my time, even before we merged with Customs in the UKBA in 2008. We haven't really geared ourselves up to a major maritime threat like this, either in terms of our infrastructure, our powers, our response capability, or our international response capability with France. So I do think we do need to have a very serious look at this and examine firstly our own capability, and are we capable of interdiction on the high seas? How would that work safely? And are we able, regardless of who picks up the individuals, once we've established they're safe and well, are we able to return them to their point of disembarkation? Because otherwise, you will continue to fuel the supply chain. This is all driven by money and smugglers. They will be showing people pictures now of what they were seeing on Sky News yesterday. Look, this is all you need to do. Pay us the money. We'll put you in a dinghy and push you off. You need to send a very, very clear message that that's not going to work. And in order to do that, we do need this comprehensive agreement with the French, post-Dublin Convention agreement on Safe Third. And, I advocate joint integrated border enforcement teams. It's something I worked on after 9/11 between Canada and the US on the Great Lakes. There are things that can be done. Huge learning from Australia, who are world leaders on this. And I really think we need to tap into that now, because I can't see an immediate end to this, what is becoming a crisis, I'm afraid.
Thank you. And we've all seen, I think, the footage you alluded to, which has been doing the rounds in the media. And of course, it appears to show, as you say, a French naval vessel accompanying a migrant, a dinghy with migrants in it from French waters into British waters, which I think surprised a lot of people because they thought they would be accompanying them back to France. And I was just wondering, as former head of the border force, could you just clarify for us what is actually going on in those images and what the legal position is?
Right, so interdiction in the high seas is an extraordinarily difficult area. It's not something that challenged us in my day. In fact, when this began 2 years ago, and I was asked about it, I thought it would simply be a flash in the pan. The advice we were getting from Coast Guards down there, from people closer to the channel, this was a very, very dangerous waterway, busy shipping lanes. These things could turn over. People are going to not run the risk. They've proved us wrong. They've been able to do it. They've been able to get across, and they've adapted their tactics in line with ours. And they've seen that if you can get close to a British vessel, then essentially you are guaranteed to be taken into one of our ports, and you are pretty well guaranteed, these are vulnerable people, to be taken into the UK system, and very unlikely that you're ever going to be returned anywhere. And that's the message that's getting out, you see. Now, in terms of the international position, the international law is that health and safety must come first. And any vessel that sees another vessel that's in that state, with women and children on board, with no navigation equipment, at risk of drowning, should immediately take measures to take them on board. As I understand it, though, the migrants are resisting any indication that they would be prepared to be rescued from a small dinghy by a French vessel. They want to be rescued by a British vessel. And so we need to be agile. We need to see what's going on, and we need to be quickly ready and able to adapt. And that's my main concern.
Thank you. And you mentioned joint teams between the Canadians and the Americans.
Sorry, can I just interrupt just a second? Sorry. I wondered whether Sarah West wanted to come in just on that particular point.
Sorry, please do.
I think I can really only comment on the operational level and reassure you that Border Force have a operating procedure in place to ensure the safety of port users and their staff, and all migrants are health screened at arrival, and we worked with them to plan so not only do our staff and port users feel safe, but also they're confident as well. So we had a good working relationship with Border Force on that. And if any migrants do get through and are not met by Border Force, then the Port of Dover Police have the ability to health screen as well.
Thank you. Just to go back to the international examples, you were talking about, Tony Smith, the Great Lakes and Australia, examples of best practice. Could you just summarise for us what they've done so well that we aren't doing at the moment?
So in the US, there is a separate organisation called the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol is a subset of the Customs and Border Protection Department, but they are responsible exclusively for irregular migration in the areas between the ports of entry and via the maritime threat. And they have a rapid response capability to protect their land borders and their sea borders. You will have seen from independent chief inspector reports over the last couple of years that the Border Force is primarily concerned with the sorts of things we've been talking about processing passengers through the border. That's a very, very big job, and they do it very well. And don't get me wrong, I know that the Border Force and Immigration Enforcement are working really, really hard with our colleagues in France to try and stop this. Of course they are. But we don't have an independent Border Patrol. There's a mixture of Border Force and Immigration Enforcement officers out there at the moment, with a mixture of training and a mixture of powers. And in Australia, what they did was create task forces, a specific task force, which was drawn from a range of different agencies, be they from Defence or Home Affairs, to deal with the boats. And they also had an offshore task force to deal with source and transit countries. So those are the kind of responses that I've seen in other countries where there have been this type of maritime threat that's relatively new to us, that I'm really keen that we take note of and bring in some advice from these countries, where I think if this is going to be an enduring threat, unless we can see some kind of a breakthrough on that.
Thank you very much. No further